He didn't even flinch when the shelving unit collapsed, just scribbled something in that damn logbook while the rest of us were diving for cover. That was Russell for you. Calm as a sleeping dog in a thunderstorm, even when a 40-gallon drum of ethyl acetate cracked open like a beer can under a forklift. The stench was choking, the alarms blaring, and he just stood there, watching, writing, not judging, just collecting the receipts. I remember thinking, who the hell is this guy? Clipboard always in hand, tucked button down, high-vis vest so clean it might have been ironed. Nobody really talked to him, not unless something went wrong. And even then, they usually just hoped he'd walk past. He wasn't management, but he sure wasn't one of the guys either. The line crew called him Clipboard Jesus, partly because of the beard, but mostly because he kept trying to save people who didn't want saving. Look, before we go further, do us a solid. If you're enjoying this so far, hit that subscribe button and like the video. It really helps the team bring more stories like this to life. You'd be surprised how many people listen all the way through without hitting that little heart. Go on, we'll wait. Anyway, I didn't think much of Russell until the old GM Marvin packed up his desk. Marvin might have been a relic, but at least he knew the factory. He respected the systems. Understood that OSHA wasn't some optional philosophy. He signed every audit Russell submitted, even when it meant slowing things down. If a machine was 1 decimal off on the PSI gauge, Marvin shut it down. He'd once halted line 3 for a missing wrench, saying, "If it's not here, it's somewhere dangerous." Then he retired, left behind a jar of Werther's on his desk and a manila folder titled, "Pending, Russell Will Know." That was his last note. Enter Chad Whitmore. The day Chad walked in, I swear you could hear his cologne before the door opened. Aviators on his head like we weren't indoors, sleeves rolled to the elbows like he'd ever touched a wrench in his life. Said he came from sales. Optimized regional performance across 7 territories. Whatever that meant. First town hall, he called the shop floor a production engine, like we were a damn car wash and not a metalworks plant with 600 DeGuasa pour lines. "Time to tighten the belt," Chad said, grinning like a game show host. "We've got legacy fat to cut, and that includes paperwork." Then he looked right at Russell, laughed, called him the patron saint of paranoia. Russell didn't flinch. He just kept chewing that same piece of gum and flipping through his binder like Chad was background noise. But it wasn't just a joke. Chad meant it. The next week, he cut back the safety drill schedule, said we didn't need theatrics, called the hazmat lockers overkill, started tossing Russell's reports in the bin before reading them, made a spectacle of it too, held one up like a magician about to pull a dove from a hat and said, "Behold, another cautionary bedtime story." Some of the guys laughed, nervous laughs, but they laughed. Thing is, Russell didn't change, still did the rounds, still logged everything, still posted the monthly audit notes in the break room, even when Chad had them torn down and replaced with efficiency goals. I started watching closer, like really watching. Russell had a pattern. He'd note things no one else saw. A corroded valve, a misaligned latch. Once, he paused during a routine walkthrough, stared at a new shelf someone had mounted near the eye wash station, and quietly said, "That shelf will kill someone." We all thought he was being dramatic. 2 weeks later, it collapsed and split open a guy's forehead, 18 stitches. After that, I stopped calling him paranoid, started calling him right. But Chad? He doubled down. Sent out a memo that all safety documentation needed his approval before formalization, which was his fancy way of saying, if I didn't see it, it didn't happen. Russell stopped CCing anyone in the reports, just filed them away. Quiet, methodical, not defeated, just different. Then one night, I stayed late to finish a production log and saw him at his desk. No lights, just his monitor casting that cold, flickering glow. He was scanning a PDF of our commercial insurance policy. I asked what he was looking for. "Backup," he said. Just that. One word. Flat. Like he'd already made peace with whatever storm was coming, and the storm was coming. We just didn't know how hard it would hit, or how ready Russell already was. You could feel it the moment he walked in, like someone kicked open the emergency exit and let a whole gust of ego blow through. Chad Whitmore didn't even sit down before he started talking. Hope you're all ready to turn the ship around, he said, striding past the break room like it owed him money. His shirt was tight in that way guys wear on purpose, his watch glinting like it had its own Instagram account. He talked fast, grinned wide, and used phrases like ROI trajectory and people velocity, which told me right off the bat he hadn't set foot on a factory floor unless it was for a photo op. And that smile? It didn't reach his eyes. Not once. First team meeting, he stood at the whiteboard with a marker he never used and said, "Let's talk fat. We've got too much of it. Paperwork, protocols, middlemen." Then he turned to Russell, slow and theatrical, like he was about to deliver a punchline. "No offense," Chad added, "but we're not a daycare. No more of this clipboard clutter. We're in the business of making things, not checking boxes." Russell didn't blink, didn't sigh, just sat there flipping a pen between his fingers, looking at the wall like maybe he could zone out hard enough to time travel. But I saw it. That stillness? That was him putting something away, tucking it deep. You don't get to work in safety for 20 years without learning to swallow your pride whole. Chad kept going, mocked the audits, called Russell's hazard logs fear-mongering, held up one of the older binders and said, "This could be a coffee table book titled How to Kill Momentum." Most of the room chuckled, not because it was funny, because Chad had the badge now. The weirdest part? Chad wasn't stupid. He just thought manufacturing was like sales. You push hard, fast, and loud. You don't check for problems, you sell the solution. But factories don't run on charisma. They run on temperature tolerances, torque settings, and rules that exist because someone once died the hard way. Russell knew that, knew it like muscle memory, but he didn't argue, didn't defend himself. When Chad tossed his latest chemical storage report in the trash during the next walkthrough, Russell didn't flinch, just noted it on his clipboard and walked away. And that was the real shift. Not Chad's noise, but Russell's silence. Because up until that point, Russell had always briefed the GM personally, always included an executive summary, always made sure the right people saw the right risks. But after that meeting, he stopped printing extras. He stopped following up. He just kept logging. Quiet, steady, like a clock that didn't care if you looked at it or not. And Chad? He was too busy trying to turn us into a lean machine. Installed digital dashboards everywhere, started timing bathroom breaks, even fired 2 temps for non-core distractions. Reed, asking about overtime policy. He kept saying we were going to hit benchmarks Wall Street would envy. We weren't even a public company. The floor crew started calling him Silicon Valley Chad. He thought it was a compliment. He didn't know the plant. Didn't understand the heat bleed from line 4, or that the overhead pipe above station C2 was overdue for inspection, or that the chemical locker inventory hadn't matched the log since the last contractor misfiled a barrel. But Russell knew. He logged it all. Every missed inspection, every canceled drill, every unlabeled container. The reports got longer, the checklists tighter, and Chad? He started streamlining. He removed lockout tag-out steps from the machinery process because it slowed ramp-up. He stopped authorizing Russell's weekly reports, called them low priority. He even bragged at a company lunch that he liberated the team from safety paranoia. That word stuck with me. Paranoia. Because here's the thing. When you've worked in a place long enough, you know when something's not paranoia. You know when something's inevitable. And Russell? He didn't try to warn Chad again. He just made a note, logged it, and somewhere behind all that quiet, he started preparing. Not for an argument, not for a fight, but for proof. It was a Tuesday, hot and thick, the kind of day where the machines sweat as much as the people do. We just wrapped second shift changeover, and Russell had the clipboard tucked under his arm like always. There was a drill scheduled for 3 p.m., evacuation and fire containment, standard quarterly stuff. Half the crew hated it, but nobody argued. Not when Russell was in charge. The guy ran drills like gospel, and even the laziest floor hand knew better than to skip. But this time, the floor was quiet. Too quiet. Chad had canceled it, sent out a mass email an hour before go time. Drill postponed. Focus on throughput. We'll revisit next quarter. That was it. No warning, no explanation. I saw Russell read it. He didn't say a word, just stared at his phone like it had grown horns. Then he slowly pulled out a red pen, the one he only used for violations, and flipped open the binder to that week's audit page. wrote something in block letters, boxed it, dated it. I couldn't see what it said, but I knew it wasn't good. After that, he didn't go to his office like usual. He went to Chad's. He didn't raise his voice. That wasn't Russell's way. But I passed by just in time to hear Chad laughing behind the glass. "You're not running a daycare, Russ. We're here to move product, not babysit grown men." Russell stood there, shoulders square, not angry, just steady. "This isn't a formality. That drill identifies blocked exits and non-compliant handling zones. Canceling it increases exposure." Chad waved his hand. "We're covered. That's what insurance is for." That was the moment something shifted in Russell's face. Just a flicker, like a window closing behind the eyes. He didn't reply, didn't try again, just nodded once and walked out. Back at his desk, he opened the logbook, flipped to a blank page, started a new section. The tabs read "Drills Skipped." Then he opened his laptop, pulled up the internal safety dashboard, and typed up a summary of the canceled drill. Locations, staff affected, risk escalation. He flagged it for review and CC'd Chad. I watched the screen over his shoulder. The message was clear, clinical. Scheduled Q3 safety drill canceled by GM Chad Whitmore at 13:06. Noted concern Ray, chemical exposure scenario unresolved. He hit send. No reply. 2 hours later, I saw him still at his desk, frowning at something on his screen. It wasn't the plant dashboard. It was the insurance portal. I'd never seen him log into it before. Most of us didn't even know it existed. But there it was, plain as day. Commercial hazard submission, third-party compliance access. He clicked through tabs like he'd done it 1,000 times, found one labeled External Risk Notification Inbox. And then he did something I'll never forget. He scanned the drill cancellation form, his red-boxed audit page, the summary email, and attached the whole thing to a submission form titled Unresolved Safety Drill Cancellation, Elevated Risk. He didn't CC Chad, didn't CC legal, didn't even print a backup. Just quietly, like he was mailing a birthday card, he sent it directly to the insurer. I didn't ask what he was doing. I didn't have to. Russell had finally stopped trying to fix things inside, and he'd started building a record outside. It wasn't revenge, it wasn't spite, it was preservation of the truth, of the paper trail, of his own damn conscience. Because Russell knew what Chad never would. Insurance doesn't care about charisma. They care about risk, documentation, warnings sent and ignored. Russell wasn't fighting Chad anymore. He was preparing for the day someone else would ask, "Did anyone see this coming?" And Russell would be able to say, "Yes, I did," in writing. It started slow, like a leak you don't notice until the floor is slick. First went the lockout tagout checks. Russell flagged them immediately, said removing that protocol was like replacing a seatbelt with a post-it note. Chad brushed it off. "We're not splitting atoms," he quipped during the Monday ops call. "We're making sheet metal and overtime excuses." The real blow came when the chemical storage logs were quietly phased out. No formal memo, no notice, just gone. One day, Russell logged into the shared compliance folder and saw half the forms labeled Archived for Efficiency. Efficiency. That was Chad's favorite word. He said it like a weapon, like anyone who questioned him was automatically inefficient. Russell didn't speak up in meetings. He just started writing more. Red ink, blue tabs, footnotes, timestamps. I watched him snap a photo of an unsealed drum in the solvent cage, tag it with a date, and file it in a folder labeled Unremediated Conditions. Each file had a number. Each number matched a memo. That's when I realized he wasn't auditing anymore. He was building a case. And Chad? He escalated. One morning, we were gathered for a mandatory floor stand-up, the kind Chad liked to host, shirt sleeves rolled high and charisma dialed to 11. "We're cutting dead weight," he announced. "No more glorified librarians with clipboards slowing the line." He turned to Russell, who'd just handed him a hazard overview for the new forklift delivery. Chad held the packet up like it was an infected towel and strutted over to the nearest shred bin. "This," he said, smiling wide for the crew, "is what I think of paperwork panic." Then he dropped the audit into the bin with a dramatic thwomp. The shredder whirred to life, chewing through the document like a chainsaw in a cornfield. Some of the newer guys laughed. One even clapped. Russell didn't flinch, didn't even blink, just reached into his folder, pulled out a carbon copy, and tucked it neatly back under his arm. Walked away like the scene hadn't happened at all. I saw Chad frown. He expected a reaction. He didn't get one. What he didn't know was that Russell had already forwarded that same report to the insurer's compliance inbox hours before the meeting, with photos, with timestamps, with a line at the bottom that read, "No corrective action initiated as of this submission." Each time Chad skipped an inspection, Russell flagged it. Each time a safety sign was removed, Russell noted the absence with GPS-tagged photos. Each time a report was ignored, Russell created a private chain submitted through the insurer's secure portal, labeled by category PPE neglect, chemical exposure, lockout removal. He never raised his voice, never sent follow-ups, just quiet, methodical escalation. And Chad kept feeding him ammunition. He eliminated the checklist sign-offs for machine cleaning, said it was self-regulated now. Shut down the monthly cross-training for emergency response. Too much downtime. When a line operator sliced open his arm on a protruding bolt that should have been capped, Chad called it a personal misstep and told HR not to classify it as a reportable incident. Russell recorded the injury, noted the bolt, photographed the blood trail, and archived the entire entry under preventable injury, risk previously documented. It was cold, precise, like a surgeon drawing a scalpel across layers of corporate negligence. We started whispering, the rest of us, not because we were scared of Chad, but because we were finally starting to realize what Russell was doing. He wasn't just covering his back, he was building a time capsule, something future investigators would open and say, it was all here, everything, in black and white, and the wildest part? He never once said, "I told you so." Not even when Chad began missing his own metrics. Not even when HR quietly reinstated the logbook archiving system Russell had built 2 years ago, without mentioning his name. Not even when the floor team, one by one, started asking him to just give a quick look at their stations before sign-off. Like he was some kind of ghost inspector no one wanted to admit was real. Russell just kept walking the floor, kept logging, kept filing, like he knew exactly how this story ended, and just had to wait for the day someone else turned the page. It was Labor Day weekend, the kind of dead silent Saturday where the shop lights flicker to themselves and the air smells like motor oil and stale vending machine popcorn. Skeleton crew on duty, 1 supervisor, 3 temps, a bored forklift operator named Trevine, and a chemical storage zone that was supposed to be cleared 2 days prior. Spoiler, it wasn't. I was home when it happened. Fire suppression alarms blared through half the south wing after Trevane clipped the edge of the high bay rack with the side fork. The unit shook once, then folded like wet cardboard. Barrels came down. Not sealed, not spaced, not labeled, not like they should have been. The splash zone reached 30 feet. Methyl ethyl ketone hit the floor like it was racing for daylight. One of the temps, Diego, I think, caught a burn up the arm trying to yank another guy away from the fumes. The suppression system kicked in late and overcompensated. Whole zone blanketed in foam. By the time emergency crews arrived, the dock smelled like a war crime and the entrance was slick with white chemical slush. I didn't hear about it from Chad. I heard about it from facilities. 6:42 a.m. Sunday morning jolted me out of sleep. "We've got a spill," the voice said. "We already called hazmat. Chad's on site. You need to get down here." I grabbed my boots. When I pulled into the lot, the fire captain was just finishing his sweep. His hazmat crew had taped off the zone with that yellow-black polytape that reads more like, "You're about to lose your job," than caution. Russell was already there, had beat me by 20 minutes, dressed like he always was, clipboard in hand, steel toes scuffed but laced. He wasn't talking, just observing, writing. Chad, meanwhile, was a wreck. Pacing near the loading bay, phone pressed so hard to his ear it looked like he was trying to absorb signal through osmosis. "Yes, we've got incident reports," he was saying to someone on speaker. Yes, we've got insurance. I'm pulling it up now." When he saw me, he stormed over. "Do you know how bad this looks?" he hissed, not even saying hello. "This could kill our premiums. We just finished Q2's P&L and now I've got to explain this?" I glanced toward the mess inside. "The solvents weren't stored correctly," I said. "They were contained." "No, they were placed, not contained. There's a difference." Chad's jaw tightened. Russell should have flagged it. He did, I replied. Chad blinked. What? I didn't answer, just nodded toward Russell, who was photographing the corner post of the collapsed rack. There was a rust halo there, obvious if you knew what to look for. A sign of rot. He'd flagged that 2 months ago. I remembered the report. Support post C3A shows corrosion at the weld seam. Recommend reinforcement or replacement. Risk of weight failure under sustained load. Chad never signed that report. Called it pessimistic overkill. Now he was chewing the inside of his cheek like it owed him rent. He pulled out his phone again. I'm calling our adjuster. We need to start the claim process. Maybe if we spin this right, equipment failure, external trigger, maybe we can avoid exclusion. Russell didn't even look up. He just wrote the words, shelving collapse, documented AOH AO3, no corrective action at the top of a fresh audit page, and snapped one more photo. A medic passed us on the way out. Diego was strapped to a gurney, eyes closed, his arms swaddled in cooling wrap. That made it real. Not just a mess, not just a policy issue. Someone got hurt, and I knew what Russell knew. This wasn't just a bad day. This was the moment the logbook became a ledger. A record no one could spin, bury, or burn. And Chad? He was still dialing, still bluffing, still clueless that the person who held the receipts wasn't the guy holding the company phone. It was the guy with the clipboard. And the insurer already had his number. Monday morning came with the same stillness as a storm you can't quite see, just feel. The air in the front office was thick, silent, phones idle. Coffee left half-sipped. You could sense it through the drywall. Something had shifted, and nobody wanted to name it yet. At 9:02 a.m., a white sedan pulled into the visitor lot. Clean, unmarked. Out stepped a woman in a gray blazer, hair pinned, no jewelry, no smile. She walked with the kind of practiced pace that says, I've done this 1,000 times. Clipboard tucked under one arm, tablet under the other. Chad was already in the lobby waiting for her, pacing and trying not to pace. When he saw her, he straightened up and hit his charm button. You must be Madison, he beamed, offering a hand. Thanks for coming so quickly. She looked at his hand like it was a question she wasn't interested in answering, gave a polite nod instead. Madison Keene, Lead Risk Adjustment Officer, North District. Will need a private conference room. Of course, Chad said, already flustered. We've got one ready down the hall. I pulled together some documentation to help streamline. I won't need your printouts, she said calmly. We've already received full pre-incident audit data through our compliance submission portal. I was standing near the copy machine when she said it. I saw it land. Chad blinked once, just once, like his brain hit a loading screen. You already received? He asked slowly, following her like a man trailing a tax auditor into his own nightmare. Yes, Madison said. We've had documented incident flags submitted over a 7-week period, drill cancellations, chemical storage issues, LOTO protocol gaps, all time-stamped. All previously unremediated as of the time of the event. She didn't even glance back, just kept walking. Chad scrambled to keep up. They disappeared into conference room B, the one with the blinds that never quite close all the way. And Russell? He never left his desk, didn't bring any files, didn't offer to join the meeting. He just kept updating his report, flipping calmly through photos from the spill scene, annotating them with simple captions like labeling non-compliant and barrel weight exceeds rack spec. I stood at my desk pretending to answer emails, but nobody was typing. Everyone was listening. The room was quiet as death, except for Chad's muffled voice behind the glass, rising and falling in what could only be described as controlled panic. I walked past on the pretense of needing a stapler. Through the slats in the blinds, I saw Madison holding a thick file. Her finger was pointed to a red tab near the top of the stack. She wasn't angry. She didn't need to be. You don't need anger when you've got documentation. Chad was sweating through his shirt. Half an hour later, the door opened. Madison exited first. Same pace, same calm. Thank you for your time, she said. My team will be in contact with your legal department. She passed Russell's desk on the way out, paused, didn't say a word, just made eye contact, gave the smallest nod, and left. Chad came out a minute later looking like someone had hit him with a boardroom chair. No cocky grin, no fake swagger. He didn't even look at Russell. just mumbled something to himself and disappeared into his office. The whispers started right after. He didn't know? Wait, Russell sent those files directly to the insurance? He's been logging everything, hasn't he? And Russell still didn't speak. He just flipped one more page on his clipboard and started a new entry. Adjuster on-site, row 904. That was the moment I realized. This wasn't damage control. This was the fuse. And Chad? He didn't even know the match had been lit. They called a leadership review that afternoon. Not a meeting, a review. When legal shows up with binders and HR brings notepads instead of laptops, you know it's more than a debrief. It was held in the main conference room, the one usually reserved for holiday potlucks and QBRs. But this time, the blinds were drawn tight, and the AC felt like it had been turned down on purpose. Cold air, cold eyes. Everyone sat in that unnatural corporate silence where even the coffee stirrers clinked too loud. Chad walked in last, suit jacket finely buttoned, trying hard to appear composed. It was the first time I'd seen him carry a folder that wasn't laminated or color-coded. He sat next to legal, kept glancing at the door like he expected someone to save him. Russell was already there, not at the head of the table, not near legal. Just in the corner, same chair he always took, notebook closed, pen balanced on top. You could have missed him if you didn't know to look, which was fitting. He wasn't there to speak. He was there because he had already spoken. Madison, the adjuster, stepped up to the screen at the far end of the table and placed a thick binder on the table with a muted thud. No drama, just gravity. "Before we begin," she said, voice even, "I want to clarify that our team has reviewed all relevant submissions concerning the September 3rd chemical spill and associated injury. What I'm about to show you is not speculative." She opened the binder. Tabbed sections, color-coded, dated, numbered. Each section began with a cover sheet. Hazard report, noted, unremediated. She flipped to the first one. "On July 19th, your safety lead submitted a flagged risk regarding structural fatigue on rack C3A. No action was recorded." She flipped again. "August 3rd, safety drill canceled. This is the message from the GM's account. No reschedule followed. Incident modeling was not completed." Another page. "August 29th, log entry noting improper containment of methyl ethyl ketone, labeled as urgent. No corrective steps filed." She paused, looked up. "This incident falls under Policy Exclusion Clause 9.2b, failure to act on documented unresolved hazards known to management." You could have heard the air molecules shift. Chad leaned forward, defensive smile already forming. "I think there may be some context here that hasn't been communicated. For example, we were under heavy throughput pressure and—" Madison didn't blink. "Management was aware of these hazards. They were submitted in writing. Our risk model is based on mitigation steps being taken. None were. But our internal reviews—" Chad started again. "Your internal reviews are not part of the claim record," she cut in. "Only verified documentation submitted through formal channels is used to evaluate coverage." Chad's face twitched. That same twitch he got when production numbers were late. A flicker of panic smothered in polish, and still, Madison didn't look at Russell. Not once. She didn't have to. Russell had already done his part. He'd sent the logs, dated the entries, attached the photos. Never once added emotion. Just facts. The real reckoning wasn't coming from him. It was coming because of him. Madison closed the binder slowly. "To be clear, our position is final. Harlow Metals will be financially responsible for cleanup and damages related to the incident. Coverage for this claim is denied under non-compliance exclusions." Silence. Chad didn't speak. Legal scribbled something fast and leaned toward him, but his shoulders had already slumped. You could see it. Something inside him had cracked open. Russell still hadn't moved. He didn't smirk, didn't raise an eyebrow. He just sat still, as if he already knew that the truth, when written carefully and filed quietly, could do the talking for him. The following Monday, Chad's parking spot was empty. No flashy sedan nosed into his reserved space. No cologne cloud sweeping through the lobby 10 minutes late. No morning blast of motivational Slack messages riddled with buzzwords and empty promises. Just silence, like he'd never been there. By noon, IT had disabled his credentials. His name disappeared from the org chart before anyone got the memo. Literally, by 12:47 p.m., his profile on the internal directory redirected to a user not found error. Rumor said it was voluntary leave. Everyone else knew better. When legal shows up with gloves on, it's not voluntary. It's surgical. No email was sent to the broader company, no town hall. Just a single quiet visit from HR to Russell's desk. "Hi, could we get a copy of your full audit archive?" the HR rep asked. "Original versions only, including flagged reports, photo documentation, and all submissions, internal and external." Russell didn't flinch. He didn't ask why, just nodded once, opened his bottom drawer, and pulled out a binder thicker than a phone book. 3 tabs were already marked: ignored, deleted, denied. He handed it over without ceremony. The HR rep took it like it was radioactive. No one said anything after that. They didn't need to. The investigation wasn't about what happened anymore. It was about how many times Chad had been told it would. And Russell? He didn't start walking taller, didn't smirk or brag. But something changed. The sarcasm stopped. No more side eyes from floor supervisors. No more jokes about clipboard Jesus during shift changes. No more safety theater jabs when he ran through protocols. Instead, they started asking questions. Real ones. "Hey Russ, can you take a look at the pressure line near Station 12, just in case? Mind reviewing the new drum stacking layout? I'd feel better if you signed off. Do you have a copy of the last chemical handling checklist? I want to make sure I'm doing it right." It wasn't an apology, but it was something better. Recognition. You could feel it in the walkarounds. Operators would stop what they were doing, not because they were told to, but because they wanted to hear what Russell saw. Like his opinion had weight now, not because of the accident, but because of what he'd done before the accident, what he'd tried to prevent. A week ago, his reports had ended up in shred bins. Now they were being requested, preemptively. One day, I passed by the small break room on level 2 and saw Russell sitting with one of the younger techs, going over a hazard log line by line. No eye rolls, no jokes, just 2 guys trying to make sure something didn't fall through the cracks. And it hit me. This wasn't just a change in hierarchy. It was a shift in respect. No one gave Russell a trophy. No one named a conference room after him. But when the new interim GM rolled out the revised safety policy that Friday, guess whose checklists were used as the template? His font, his color tabs, his protocol order, word for word. No credit given, none needed. Russell didn't want a spotlight. He wanted people to listen before someone got hurt. And now, finally, they were. 2 weeks after the spill, Diego came back to the floor. His arm was still bandaged from wrist to elbow, red and healing slow, but he walked in on his own, helmet under one arm, and nodded at everyone like nothing happened. The break room went quiet for a second. Then someone clapped. It wasn't loud, just one guy, then another. Then the whole place joined in. Not cheering, not whooping, just this steady, slow rhythm of hands slapping palms. Diego gave a small smile and pointed toward the shop floor like he was ready to clock in. But he didn't walk to his station. He walked to Russell, said, "Thank you." Russell didn't make it a moment, just nodded once and handed Diego a new set of PPE forms with a checklist updated to reflect the new solvent placement zones. Not a single word about what had happened, just the next right step. That same morning, the OSHA rep came and went like a ghost, left behind a single-page summary, no findings against procedure, all hazard reporting reviewed and substantiated. One line near the bottom said it all. Facility safety protocol met compliance benchmarks. Incident stemmed from failure to act on internal reporting. Translation. Russell had done his part, and then some. A few hours later, a memo hit the entire company inbox. From the new interim GM, a woman named Marlene Pike. No fluff, just 4 bullet points and a directive. Effective, immediately, safety audits are mandatory weekly. All hazard reports must be documented in triplicate. Drill scheduled to resume as per Q1 framework. All checklist templates provided by R. James will be used moving forward. That was it. No signature flourish, no corporate cheerleading, just policy. Clear, direct, long overdue. Russell didn't say anything when he read it, just flipped open his laptop and updated the audit folder titles from contested to implemented. A quiet rename, a quiet win. And for the first time in a long time, no one questioned the extra forms he left on the clipboard station. They just took them. Something had changed, not with noise, but with acknowledgement. It was in the way people stepped aside during his walkarounds now, the way the forklift guys double-checked their logs before he got to them, the way no one touched the shred bin near the break room anymore, like it had become sacred, or cursed. At orientation the next week, I watched a new hire, young, fresh from trade school, maybe 22, point toward Russell during the safety walkthrough. "Who's that guy?" he asked. "Everyone moves when he walks by." The line supervisor, without missing a beat, replied, "That's Clipboard Jesus. He's why you'll make it home." The kid blinked. The supervisor didn't elaborate, didn't need to, because by now everyone on that floor knew paper wasn't the enemy, it was the shield. And Russell? He was the one who held it, steady, silent, and right on time.